What's it going, my dear viewers? I bring to you Season 2 of the Eminence in Shadow in 3 parts. This here is part 1, but I've probably put a playlist in the corner here, which has all of my Eminence in Shadowy videos, if you feel like watching those. Anyway, when we last left off, Delta skitters around the forest at nighttime, while Beta reports that the cult of Diablos has ceased its activities lately. This is all according to the master plan. The Shadow Ladies express growing concerns about the influx of cash flowing into the Lawless City, a region uncontrolled by any existing nations. Significant changes in this area of the world could have butterfly effects on the rest of society. Shadow smells a smelly smell, which causes his women to whip out their emergency perfumes. It is the scent of blood, a storm of it, an ominous blood moon, the herald of a great tragedy doomed to repeat on this very lunar cycle. Alpha settles the garden's nervous twitching. Shadow interrupts her valiant speech to insist that he investigate the river of money, blood. The girls are worried, but Shadow eases their fears. Delta may as well just not wear clothing at all. The ladies continue to revere Shadow's omnipotence, which is still only a coincidental facade. These fools have come to challenge the Blood Queen, one of the 3 rulers of the Lawless City. They make fun of the lifeless plebs, but a chain gimp shows up to gatekeep. He displays the results of challenging the Blood Queen by introducing them to Mr. Stumpy and the Chain Gang. The warriors show no fear, but quickly find that the White Devil is formidable. Later, Cid visits the notorious city with his sister, Claire, who is there on Dark Knight business. After a brief recap of the previous season, Cid explains how Claire won the Bushin Festival and decided to immediately slay vampires. While dragging Cid through town, she explains how his attendance will look good on his resume. Cid reflects on his future as the second born of his family when they are approached by a slaver eager to display his newest products, Goldie Gilded and Quinton. Cid finds them familiar, but Claire has no interest and heaves him away. He complains about being dragged. However, Claire understands that he will wander off otherwise. She was right. Cid discovers the lucrative profession of anti-thievery. Business is booming, as Cid gives thanks for the bountiful eggs produced by his precious golden goose. Some vampire fella is being beaten up in an alleyway, a visual statement of the local culture. Suddenly, the blood moon throbs, sending a pulse of magic throughout the city, inducing the ghoul, which goes on to ravage its abusers and usher in the start of a zombie outbreak. Cid contemplates his place in the narrative when a red-haired babe takes the initiative. She slays the ghouls threatening Cid, introducing herself as Mary, the ancient vampire hunter, and coldly stating that the frenzy has begun and we are out of time. Cid is inspired by her dramatic ambiguity. Claire is enraged after finding Cid's room to be devoid of his scent. She obliterates a sexy zombie in frustration, then goes to look for him. Skell the sailor and Poe the Tato just happen to be visiting the Red Light District to crest their summer of maturity with this brave new world, but the apocalypse is upon them. Meanwhile, this prostitute laments living a life rife with abuse. She is suddenly faced with a ghoul's torment, then saved by Shadow, who goes on to repeat the cryptic phrases he heard from the vampire hunter, then vanishes. Some woman shows up to explain she was saved by the Shadow, which gives her the resolve to flee the town. This white-haired beast lady, named Lady Yukime, monologues poetically over the flame-wrought town. Claire grieves over the corpse of someone she thinks was Cid. She is approached by Mary, who informs her that she found a couple of fellas who match his likeness. She tells Claire about both of them, and the Blood Queen, who has begun taking people to her tower to use as sacrifices for her revival. The girls team up to achieve their joint goal and get going. A buff guy named Juggernaut laughs from his vantage point. The Dark Knights Association struggles to ward off the ghouls, but are saved by Shadow, who once again enigmatically repeats Mary's words and then vanishes. The vampire lords discuss the goings-on and prepare for backlash from the other 2 rulers of the city, Yukime and Jugs. One other has given them trouble. Yukime and Juggernaut battle in the midst of the city's chaos, while Shadow monologues dramatically from the sky. He intervenes, introducing himself as Shadow, he who lurks in the shadows in order to hunt the shadows. This freak loves killing. He finds a couple powerful foes amidst the slaughter and grumbles about his misfortune. Another challenger enters the fray. Juggernaut continues his warpath while Shadow informs them of the blood frenzy. Yukime the spirit fox thanks Shadow for his work and pieces out. Meanwhile, this guy is conflicted and doesn't recognize Shadow. He goes for an easy kill, but finds himself undergoing mitosis a moment later. Beta does research on the Cult of Diablos' technology inside the Crimson Tower and is interrupted by the clumsy vampire hunters. Beta introduces herself. They find her presence intriguing. After determining that she isn't an immediate threat, Beta reveals that she is looking for progenitor vampire blood due to the similarities between the meatballs and vamps. Mary doesn't appreciate the comparison, but they agree to stay out of each other's way. Claire asks about curing the meatball disease, doesn't get an answer, then reveals that she's looking for Cid. Rose is shook, but silenced immediately. Beta taunts Mary by questioning her lack of desire to strive for haven. Number 666 is scolded by Beta. The hunters continue to slice their way through to the top as Claire interrogates Mary about her intentions. She cryptically reveals that she is some kind of ancient being and states candidly that Claire is destined to become a meatball. Suddenly, Juggo causes a ruckus. He apparently just iced some of the strongest vampires residing within the Crimson Tower. His spidey senses picked up on their presence and attacks. They are instantly beaten back. However, Claire is fairly strong and stabs his foot. Mary is sliced in half or something like that, but romantically makes out with Claire to regenerate her corporeal form. The fight continues with a vibrant exchange of colors. The Juggernaut is remarkably quick though and teleports behind them. Shadow shows up to make sure Claire isn't eviscerated. He disappears as abruptly as he arrived, informing them about the blood frenzy, as usual. The ladies are confused. Claire is flustered by her unexpected erotic venipuncture. Mary reveals all. 1,000 years ago, the golden age of vampires came to an end at the hands of humans. During that time, the Blood Queen Elisabeth intended to live alongside the humans, so she gave up drinking blood. She had a few followers who were able to live regular human lives after emulating her example. However, as a progenitor vampire, the queen could not live like her children, despite her longing to do so. On that fateful blood moon a millennia ago, Elisabeth was given a single drop of tomato juice, which caused her to go totally feral, bathing her precious haven in a torrent of blood. By the time Mary had gotten around to check up on the queen, she had sealed herself in the cold prison of death. Unfortunately, the fall of Haven was no coincidence, and the collection of vampires known as Crimson seized control. In the present, said organization is attempting to use Queen Elisabeth for their own ambition. That thing looks familiar. Claire reveals her own plight. She wishes to set Cid up for a good life before inevitably being reduced to a lump of fleshy magic. Mary states her intention is to give her queen eternal rest, fulfilling her wish to remain dead. Claire grieves for the loss of Haven and its benevolent ruler. They mentally prepare themselves for the battle ahead. Shadow bursts into the Crimson Tower's treasury to pilfer their riches. He is elated by the magnificent spread of wealth as he loots. He vows to break his habit of showing up late to boss battles and begins Operation Start the Last Boss Battle before the named characters show up, so they'll see it and be all, whoa, what an intense battle. There's no way we can fight like that. I guess Queen Elisabeth's heart is this spooky orb, which Crimson stuffs into this guy. Shadow suddenly annihilates the entire upper half of the tower. None of the vampires he exploded felt powerful enough to be the boss, so he goes to look around some more. The girls arrive at the scene of the slaughter and begin to frantically search for their people. Claire is suddenly run through by a noodle. Elisabeth has resurrected successfully and begins to feast on Claire like a corn on the cob. Shadow Garden rescues Claire and dispatches Elisabeth in the next instant. Somehow Claire is still alive despite all that. Probably magic. Beta assumes that Shadow had something more important to do since the main boss is clearly right here. She vows to protect Shadow's sister, gives orders to her underlings, then goes on the offensive. Their attack is thwarted by vampire magic, but Beta uses the opportunity to give Elizard a good blast. This also doesn't work and is topped off by Elisabeth's full awakening. Her magic level is apparently higher than Alpha's. The Kitsune Lady and Juggernaut show up to have their peace. The Vampire Queen unleashes a barrage of pointy Twizzlers willy-nilly, which causes a considerable amount of damage. Juggo's leggy is broke. Beta and her ladies are messed up too. She notices that Elisabeth is only becoming stronger and orders the others' evacuation. Rosert is hesitant. Beta and the ladies are re-meatballified after their blood is messed with at a genetic level. Claire becomes a fully fledged flesh sack, then awakens to a clinical bedroom where Aurora informs her that he cured her meatballism a while ago. Claire is understandably understandably confused because Aurora is being intentionally vague. She continues to explain how currently her body is overloading on juice and will soon become a gross mess. The witch has some plans to help out a little bit, but is interrupted by a torrent of reasonable questions. She explains the concept of Darwin's evolution, adaptation in nature, gets carried away, then finishes by saying that the progenitor of vampire blood and the meatball blood are similar in the way that monkeys and humans are genetically split, which means that Claire is now fusing monkey blood and vampire blood together to metamorphose into a meatball. Unfortunately, Claire lacks the control to successfully transform and would normally degrade, but she was tinkered with a little bit by Aurora. Aurora begins to peace out, probably meaning that Claire is waking up. Before doing so, Claire finally gets clarification that this he figure is actually Shadow. Beta is shook. Claire is temporarily Aurora, the Witch of Calamity, whose bust is slightly more prominent than her own. She gets to work after stating that she is the original vampire. The blood groups are convinced to turn on their caster, but Elisabeth's feral rampage is unhindered. Aurora decides to explode her several times, much to the concern of the spectators. This also doesn't do much, so she tries to imitate Shadow, but finds that Claire's body can't handle the magical pressure. Beta is shook twice over. Elisabeth congeals back into place, and Aura evaporates to wherever she came from after sensing Shadow's presence. Here he is, as dramatic as ever. Beta is thrilled. He engages with the queen in a gaudy show of force. Beta becomes enamored with his display and assumes he hasn't ended the fight because he's protecting his ladies. Beta recites poems to herself and gives Shadow encouragement. He teleports directly in front of the vampire, which causes them to play Tron in the sky. Jugs finds this unnecessary, but Yukime is enamored. That's a good thumbnail right there. Shadow declares checkmate, while Elisabeth asks for his phone number. Shadow goes for his atomic move, but turns it into recovery magic instead, which grayscales the entire town, repaints the moon, and reverts the chaos. Claire's all fixed up too. Rose is inspired by the concept of Queen Elizabeth's haven. Then the ladies of Shadow Garden head out. Juggernaut wants to pick a fight with them. The side characters lament their trip to the Lawless City. Cid contemplates blood stuff and reflects on Claire's new tattoos. She goes ahead and tells him about them, with a grim whisper. Cid doesn't mind though, and gives her reassurance. Claire asks him about Shadow, and falls asleep. Cid muses over the trials and tribulations awaiting his sister, narratively wrapping up the vampire arc by stating that he robbed so many people that he doesn't need money anymore. But if he ever does, the Lawless City can always be his piggy bank. Some thugs have taken over a train transporting goods for Shadow Garden's enterprise, the Mitsugoshi Company. The Mitsugogu employees are sexually harassed, but this guy reveals valuable information on his boss, Garter. Apparently, he's supposed to be an upstanding fellow with religious roots. Well, Shadow Garden already knows all this anyway, and unsheathes the sword of judgment on the bandits. Alpha and Nu discuss the events that will inevitably follow this attack. A war is beginning. Poe and Skell reveal their newly attained fashions from Mitsugoshi. They're just posers though. Cid's outfits were selected by Alpha, so his are the real deal. He reflects on the significant cultural changes brought by his knowledge of modern Japan, and does this in response to figuring that his girls aren't interested in a free market economy. He goes to claim what is his, which I'm pretty sure is money related. Cid dons a disguise, metamorphosing into John Smith, a member of Yukime's collective of shady merchants. She informs him that Garter has called an emergency meeting of the major corporate alliance to strengthen their pushback against Mitsugoshi's monopolization. Yukime's plan is to use their mercantile quarrels as a smokescreen to fleece them both. John Smith is warned of Garter's underworld swordsman, Getan, the Sword Devil, who is pulling the strings from the shadows. Yukime has hostile memories of him and vows to defeat Getan, and so the battle begins, with John Smith in the vanguard. Sometime later, the entire trading district placed its products on sale. Cid mulls over the aggressive expansion of Mitsugoshi and the fallout effects which have saturated the local economy. He figures that due to their disregard for the rest of the merchants, Mitsugoshi will struggle to be an island all to itself and will inevitably collapse. So when that happens, Cid will be there to build it back up again with a new corporation. While buying some dilapidated merch, Poe pays with paper tender, a new release from the corporate alliance. Cid is introduced to Mitsugoshi's bill as well, which is superior in every way. He has an emergency flashback to the event when he explained banks and credit to the girls. Cid has a brain blast after examining the difference in quality. He has nefarious ideas from profiting from counterfeit dollars and runs away with posed money and delight. Later, John Smith explains the concepts of credit, interest, and currency to Yukimami. He points out the discrepancy between notes and hints that the corporate alliance bill would be extremely easy to fake. Yukime quickly points out a major flaw in his plan. Those banknotes are currently only in circulation in the capital, and should they attempt to counterfeit them, they would be easily shut down. John Smith goes into a mild panic after being unexpectedly outplayed and covers by doubling down with a vague oppression. Yukime feels his expectation and invents the concept of inflation, which would be an excellent weapon to use against both companies. When the people doubt the value of their paper money, they will make a desperate scramble to the banks to exchange their dollars for gold. If they can capitalize on the resulting panic, then there is money to be made. John Smith triples down on his vagueness and receives Yukime's final answer. This is the plan which will crumble the market. Yukime believes that John Smith was testing her and feels relief after his departure. Meanwhile, Cid is visited by Delta, who has returned from nature. She picks up on the fox smell, but is brushed off. Delta decided to visit because Alpha sent her to hunt bandits in the area. Cid convinces her to leave by reminding her of her mission. Garter and Geton discuss their consistent failings, resulting in Geton sending out his elite assassins. Somewhere in the sewers, Delta has a great time massacring some plebs with Shadow. She is recognized by a fellow beast person who smells like her dad. She doesn't care for weak siblings, however. Delta explains in simple terms that her father is a chief with thousands of children because he is the strongest. She attempts to get Shadow to become the new chief, but he has no interest, and they go home. Geton finds that his elites have been dismembered. Garper sweats profusely in a panic. Geton wants none of his sass while he fondles his special trinket. He then gives a bunch of strategic orders, ponders the true strength of Mitsugoshi, and that's the end of part 1 of season 2 of the Eminence in Shadow. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment or something. I have a Patreon as well, should you feel obligated to toss me a shekel. Thanks to those who have already bathed me in shekels. Anyway, thanks again. Bye.